Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to you wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another Zoom meeting and podcast of Here's Tom with the Weather, where we investigate the plethora of higher powers that populate the vast universe of recovery. We delve deep into those steps where the founders of AA encourage us to find some kind of higher power, as long as it's not us. For example, in the third step of the Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program, it states, we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. And also to the 11th step, where it states, sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him, praying only for knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry that out. We speak to people with all manner of higher powers, from those who are atheists, Sufis, agnostics, Christians, Buddhists, followers of Islam, paganists, and those who subscribe to something called non-duality. We leave no stone unturned. It's our aim to promote understanding and open-mindedness so that alcoholics and addicts can find a higher power of their own to stay sober and carry the message. And please remember, and this is important, that this is not an AA meeting. It's just some people's versions of the truth, whatever that may be. Sometimes we seek to seekers, to people not necessarily in recovery, and to gurus. And today, it's my honor to introduce you to Wayne Lickerman. Hi, Wayne.
Hello, David.
Good to meet you, mate. And I'm just going to give a quick bio, and this is something I've taken off one of the websites. So this is just a quick bit about Wayne. Wayne Lickerman has been sober for 35 years and describes himself as a family man with a successful export business. He met his first and final guru, Ramesh Balsekar, in September 1987. His first book, No Way, A Guide for the Spiritually Advanced, was published in 1990 under the pen name of Ram Tzu. And because, and I quote, he didn't want a bunch of miserable seekers cluttering up his living room. In fact, Wayne did not speak publicly until Ramesh asked him to do so during a visit to India in 1996. And when he returned home, word had spread and he started receiving requests to speak across the country and then around the world. He's also the author of many other books, including Nevermind, A Journey into Non-duality. He's the editor of Consciousness Speaks, and there's several other books by Ramesh Balsekar, who referred to Wayne as his spiritual son. And since then, he's written a book called Enlightenment is Not What You Think, and The Way of Powerlessness, Advaita and the 12 Steps of Recovery. His most recent book was Hello, My Loves, 10 Years of Writings to the Seekers of Truth in 2015. He describes his teachers as pure Advaita, non-duality, uniquely presented in an uncompromising, sometimes humorous way, without religious dogma or New Age veneer. And I love that description. And today we're going to be discussing his book, The Way of Powerlessness, Advaita and the 12 Steps of Recovery. And what's going to happen, I'm going to ask a few questions at the start here to get the ball rolling. And then I'm going to invite people in the audience here today to raise their hand and put into, if you send me a message in chat, just in terms of what your question might be, and then I'll unmute you and you can ask it yourself. So Wayne, thank you very much again to have you here. And I've read your book this week. I've seen you on YouTube over several years, and it's a real honor to have you here, as I said. And I just want to just kick off with the first thing. And I love the way you describe in your book how you were struck sober. And I love that word about being struck sober. And just in terms of what we are about here, what Here's Tom with the Weather is all about. Can you tell us that story? Give us a brief sort of idea of how you were struck sober and how that led to you finding that thing you described in step 2 as well, of how you could sort of conceived of a higher power.
I was an active alcoholic and drug addict for 19 years. And at the end of that period, my wrists and ankles were swollen with alcoholic edema. I had lost fine control of my bladder such that I had a big wad of toilet paper stuffed down my pants that I changed every 20 minutes. And I didn't have a problem. As far as I was concerned, that's just how it was. And I could stop anytime, and I was the master of my destiny. This was my lifestyle choice. Everything was fine. Just leave me alone and I'm okay. And I had no desire to stop drinking, or stop doing drugs, even though, I was quite literally dying. I couldn't see it, didn't know it. And here in the States, we have a holiday, Memorial Day weekend, and I had a 4-day drunk, solid, fueled with a lot of cocaine. And at the end of that, I was lying in bed and I felt the desire to drink and do drugs leave my body. It was a palpable experience. I was simply gone. And it was 1 o'clock in the morning or something. And it was shocking to me. So I didn't know what to do. I went downstairs. I thought, even though I'd never heard of Alcoholics Anonymous or the 12 Steps or any of that, somehow it had seeped into my consciousness that that was where you went and you turned yourself in when you couldn't drink anymore. And so at 2 o'clock in the morning or so, I called Alcoholics Anonymous, and somebody picked up the phone. And at that time, there was a telephone book. I looked up the number in the telephone book, and I was directed to a 7 a.m. meeting, because I asked them, "When's your next meeting? What do I do?" I said, "Go there," and I went. And they gave me a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I went home and went to sleep for nearly 24 hours. And when I started reading that book, I identified with what they were saying, and I realized that that was me. And I was, I had some hope, I guess, even though that the first meeting I went to was dreadful. And mind you, I'd been up for 4 days, so that may have colored my vision a bit. But the proposition that that I had a disease, that there was a possibility of recovery, intrigued me and excited me. And the only problem I had was that they talked about God. It was just incessant all through the book, and God this, God that, God this, God that. And I had rejected God. God was something that weaklings needed as a crutch, and I was above that. I was a master of my destiny. I could make things happen. It was up to me. And so in order to read the book, I actually wrote over the word God in the big book, infinite unknown. And because I couldn't get through the sentences, the word God would stop me. And so the fact is that I was introduced to a man in a meeting who had a similar aversion to God that I had. And he had just come back from India. He had a big library of spiritual books. And he said, "Hey, look, this higher power business is wide open. Fine, infinite unknown is fine. Just have a look if you're interested." And I started browsing through his library, and that began an incredible adventure.
Certainly sounds like it. That's great. And when you said that you mentioned the word intriguing, and that's the thing, just through reading your book, it's really it's beautiful to watch how you went from kind of, would you describe yourself as an atheist or agnostic who had that problem with God, who's had a wholesale change? Would that be a fair description? That
would be a very fair description.
And so I love how you came up in the book, where the whole title of the book is The Powerlessness of It. And that's a big thing, I think, for Advaita, as much as I know about it. And I wouldn't profess to know a huge amount about Advaita or non-duality. But it seems to me, in the stuff that I've read, is that the powerlessness was that something that came to you as you were doing your research, or you you open. I guess you found an opening. You became open-minded about it. That was an important part of it, I guess. Yeah.
Clearly so.
Yeah.
And basically, it was about overcoming the prejudice that I had and recognizing that what I was against was an idea that was not being promoted in the 12 steps, which was God as a guy with a benevolent being with a beard who was, well, sometimes benevolent and sometimes vicious, and I mean, that which I railed against, and I railed against the whole corporate structure of religion that developed around that and all the rest of that. And the fight went out of me at some point, and the openness to really truly investigate what it was that I was, what it was that enabled me to be sober. Because in being struck sober, there was no denying, this was my big problem. There was no denying that I hadn't done that. I didn't want it. It was clear to me that in a moment, my life changed 180 degrees, because the obsession to drink and use drugs, which had accompanied me for 19 years, was gone, absolutely gone. And I hadn't done that. So what had? That was the opening.
So you had an awareness when you sort of lost that desire to drink, that you maybe toyed with the idea that was a sort of a spiritual awakening itself, is that was taken away from you. However, like when you say struck sober, that was a spiritual experience.
I later characterized it as a spiritual experience. I mean, at the time, it was just like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Like, what's going on? I didn't have any context for that. And I certainly wouldn't have put it in a spiritual context at the time.
It was quite miraculous. And the big one, I guess, the big takeaway that I got from the book, well, there was lots of takeaways, but the big one that I love, and I've heard it said in different ways, but I love your FSA. Now, in the UK, where I'm based, the FSA is the Financial Services Authority, and that has a whole lot of connotations which are very negative. And your FSA certainly is a wonderful idea. Could you tell us how you came to that? Because I love the idea of that, the FSA, the false sense of authority. I love that.
Well, it's actually the false sense of authorship. And authorship is the sense that we make things happen as authors of them. In other words, that we're the ones that are ultimately responsible. And so in investigating this sense that we have of authorship, which is what makes us feel guilty when we say, okay, I did that, and I could have in that moment done it differently. I should have done it differently. You see, that assumes that I was the source of a particular action or thought or feeling, and guilt emerges from that. So this term, false sense of authorship, points us back to look at this quality within ourselves in which we claim to be the ones making things happen as the author, which is different from doing them. Obviously, we're doing them. Obviously, we're thinking them and feeling them, and that's not at question. It's what is the source of that which we do. And the first step of Alcoholics Anonymous really points us to that. It says we are powerless, first over this in AA, over a substance, alcohol, which opens the door to the second part, which is that we do not manage our own lives. Meaning we are powerless, meaning we are not we are not the authors of that which we do. And that in order to survive, in order to live with this awareness, we have to recognize some power greater than ourselves that is actually what is fueling our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And then the the steps up through step 11 are all about facilitating this quality of powerlessness, of helping us to recognize that we truly are not God
But
as individuals.
Yeah. It's because it intrigues me, and again, I've been sort of warned off by other people that I've spoke to about asking this question. But I think, I guess, in our terms, as described in the big book, we're talking about the ego. Perhaps would that be fair enough? That FSA.
It is.
Yeah.
I used to use the term ego. I've been talking about this stuff for 25 years,
Yeah,
and
sure.
For the first number of years, I did use the term ego to point to this. But unfortunately, that term is very amorphous and non-specific, and it includes a lot of stuff which is not covered or is confusing when we're trying to home in on this quality, which is what produces the suffering.
Okay.
And ego is often thought of just as who I am, as having qualities and characteristics. That's so this term false sense of authorship, which came to me in the shower like 15 years ago or something like that,
right?
Is simply a way of talking about the ego in a very specific way, and specifically about the sense that I am an independent entity making things happen.
And it's claiming ownership, essentially, is what you're talking. It's claiming ownership of us, and that it's taking, well, not even taking responsibility, but it's sort of saying that we're responsible for all the stuff that we do. It's sort of, would that be right?
Yes, and responsible is a kind of a funky word, but responsible again as the source of what we do. Right. We may be held responsible by society and by those around us for what we do, but what we're pointing at is what is it that fuels what we do? What makes us do what we do?
And well, the point of what I was trying to make before is, and again, this is a speculation, and again, there's some people there that have told me not to. This is probably not a wise route to go down. But what is the point of the FSA or the ego, as we described it? Is that why is something being created that gets in the way of clouding our true nature? Why do we have it? Why is it there?
I have no idea why the world is the way it is.
Okay.
And this teaching, this living teaching of Advaita that I talk about, simply is pointing to the way things are. Why they are the way they are is subject for endless speculation.
Sure. And we've had a couple of speakers on. Kurt is in this room, Kurt Zimmerman there. I think you know Kurt. And we had a guy called Rupert Spira on a little while ago as well. And it fascinates me as to why we get mesmerized by the FSA, is that oftentimes when we practice the steps or we practice something called self-inquiry, is that even though you might do it, there are times when it sort of it sticks to us, or we stick to it and we get mesmerized back into it. Why does that happen? Why are we getting stuck to it, do you think? And how's a way of getting out of it?
I have no idea why it is, and I've not found any reliable way to get out of it that works for everybody. If there was one, we would have heard about it by now.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, thank you for that. I love your analogy as well, and just would you tell everyone, I don't want to give away too much because I would like to, obviously, we're going to put details of your book in the chat. But can you tell us?
You're not going to ruin the plot line of this, Dave.
No, I'm not going to ruin the plot line because wait till you see the final chapter, everyone. It's bloody amazing. But just could you tell us the analogy? I love the analogy of the guy in India. There was a guy in a street, an old guy in the street, and I love that analogy. Could you relay that to us? Because I think it's beautiful, a beautiful analogy.
Well, it was in Bombay, and we were traveling along, and there was a guy. He was sitting by the side of the road on a piece of cardboard, and in the middle of not on the edge of a 2-lane or 3-lane road, in which there's 5 lanes of traffic, as is often the case in India. huge trucks are passing right by his feet, you know, within this far of him. I mean, and there's this incredible Indian chaos, which, I mean, Indians are professionals at chaos.
Yes.
And there's this unbelievable chaotic din and activity. And this guy is sitting cross-legged, peaceful as anything on this piece of cardboard by the side of the road. And he's going like this. He's directing the traffic. You know, and he's just sitting there going like this, directing the traffic.
Yeah.
You know, and it struck me that if you ask this guy, what are you doing? He says, well, I am responsible for making, for all of this. He said, without me, this would be chaos.
Yeah.
I'm the one who's ordering this. I'm making sure that everybody knows that they got to go like this. You see?
Yeah.
And this to me is the claim of authorship. This is the, you know, and it is self-agreeing, so to speak.
Yes.
You know, it proves itself.
Yeah, it's a wonderful.
You see? I mean, look in front of you.
Yeah.
It's working.
I wonder if he's still there. Or does somebody do shift work? Somebody comes and takes over from him after 6 hours, maybe. Yeah, exactly. I think we all. Yeah, it's wonderful. So there's the standard questions I want to ask in a minute. Do we live in an illusion? Are we living in a dream? And how does that work? Is it a matrix? Are we living in a matrix? Are we living in a hologram? Are we in a dream?
I have no idea.
Okay. Okay. What is God? Who is God? What's your conception of God?
Not me.
Great. Okay.
And I have no conception, truly, of God. I mean, I think your next question is like, who do you want to meet or something like that?
Yeah, there's later on, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And I hate to, you know, like blow the surprise here. The person that I would be interested in meeting would be Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching. And the first line of the Tao Te Ching is that the Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. So the God that can be conceptualized, that can be talked about, that can be known, is not the true God, you see? And that to me is, when I talk about God, it is literally the infinite unknown and unknowable.
And is that because of the FSA or the ego or however, is that it's like a computer that has no rational kind of understanding of that infinite or whatever? We just don't have the capacity to grasp that, do you think?
No, it's just structurally impossible, because in order to grasp something, you have to be separate from it.
Okay.
And we are not separate from this. We are integral to it. And so it cannot be known as an object in the way that our minds know things.
And I guess it's like in the big word, it said rocketed to the fourth dimension, etc. It's beyond our capacity, I guess. So yeah. Well, I was interested to hear as well about your teacher, who passed unfortunately several years ago. But is it true? Did you say? I think I saw that he was a student of Nisargadatta. Is that the case? And
yes, he was. He was his translator, his morning translator.
Okay. And sorry, go on.
He was an interesting fellow because he was the president of the Bank of India. His name was Ramesh Balsekar. He was educated at the London School of Economics. So his command of the language of English was extraordinary. He was brilliant. And he was a wealthy Brahmin. And he was translating for this very poor bidi, which is a hand-rolled Indian cigarette maker, who had a little shop in the slum of Bombay. And he would go there and translate for him, because at that time, a book called I Am That had come out that had become popular in the West, and people were coming from around the world to see him in his shop. And Ramesh was uniquely situated as to translate.
Beautiful. Just through trying to go and buy some rolled up cigarettes, then, yeah, get some beady.
No, actually, he read about it in there was an article about this fellow in a magazine called The Mountain Path, which was published by the ashram of Ramana Maharshi, who's another non-dual teacher.
Oh, okay. So he obviously had an interest from an early age as well. Your teacher was. He went into the Bank of India after but he'd already had an idea or had an interest in these kind of things, in non-duality or Advaita.
He said he had always felt the truth of it intuitively, even though he had a more traditional guru throughout most of his life. It was only when he retired that he began to investigate Advaita in its essence.
And what's the difference between traditional Advaita Vedanta and, I guess, the direct path? I know it's been called. There's different. I'm a little bit confused about that. But is there a difference between traditional Advaita and the direct path?
I'm sure there are. I mean, there are differences. There's profound differences, and so, but they're all pointing to the same thing, and that's what is crucial, as far as I'm concerned. It is what is being pointed at, not the process of pointing, which is important.
So going back to your spiritual journey, did you practice something called self-inquiry, or how did you progress in terms of how did that progress from, you've sort of did the steps, you found a spiritual thing that intrigued you, and it grew and it grew. What was the practice that you went through with non-duality to get to where you are today, shall we say?
I wouldn't say it was no non-duality practices per se. I did when I discovered this spiritual, I describe it as kind of the spiritual bazaar, like the Turkish bazaar.
Yeah.
And it was, to me, it was so fascinating and so exciting. There were all these people with, because I was interested. I was trying to find what it was that had gotten me sober, what had struck me, had changed me so profoundly. What was the nature of that? And in wandering around in the books, I was introduced to all of these different people and all these different ideas and all these different practices. And there were Sufis, and there were non-duality people, and there were Taoists, and there were Buddhists, and there were mystical Christians, and there were, all of this stuff. And it's like walking around in a Turkish bazaar. Hey, try me. I've got the best. No, try this one. This is the best. No, take this, taste this. And I did. It was a fascinating couple of years, doing all kinds of meditations. I took up Tai Chi. I did breathing meditations. I did this. I did that. I went to these, see these teachers and this talk and over here. It was amazing.
So there wasn't any. Was it the meditation? Was it self-inquiry? Can you give us some sort of an idea about how that grew? I know that you progressed spiritually, so I'm intrigued to know how you came to some kind of realization or spiritual fulfillment.
Whether I've progressed spiritually or not is a matter of some debate, I would imagine.
Okay. So you're not going to be drawn on that then, eh? Come on. No?
There are so many techniques available, and what I tell people is, if you're drawn to one, do it. And, when that runs out, do the next one and see where it takes you. I don't have a formula. And I've never found a formula that is effective for everybody, including the 12 steps.
Okay. So now I'm going to invite more. I've got members of the audience here who I've got some questions. I've already got one as my friend David Wright in London. David, you've got a question for Wayne? I'm just asking you to unmute there, mate.
Thanks, David. I'm actually in Kent, but it doesn't really matter. Kent's just below London. So, hello, Wayne. It's really amazing to talk to you, actually. I read your book some months ago, and I've been following Advaita, this path, which kind of, I don't know, something called me to be with a teacher, and I came across Muji and spent a long time with him, and Rupert I've also spent time with, and this path has just been kind of really calling me, and everything about it I've just been reading, and it just continuously points to the truth. And so one of the things I loved about your book is that it really kind of simplifies and clearly expresses the compatibility between Advaita and the 12 steps. And what I love about that is that it highlights this, what you say, false sense of authorship, this sense of there being a me that is directing life. And I think that's one of the greatest values of Advaita, is that it really highlights them, you know, through inventory, through where we feel it most strongly, through resentment and fear, when we really feel like that individual me. And so what Advaita has done is really help me to see clearly that me, that all these thoughts that we feel belong to this thing called a me, it doesn't really exist. And so thank you for your book. I've shared it with many people that I work with in recovery, and I sponsor, and I think it makes things very, very clear. So my question, I guess, would be, how would you express what for somebody, I guess, that is new, what's the greatest value of Advaita for anyone working a 12-step program? What would you say that would be?
Well, my prejudice, I guess, or the part of all of this that really intrigues me is this question of powerlessness, and which I feel is fundamental to the 12 steps, and which is fundamental as well to Advaita, in the sense of calling into question the independence of the entity. So in the way I talk about all of this, and I don't speak for Advaita or anything else, but this living teaching of Advaita, which I do talk about, is about the notion of an independent entity. As far as I'm concerned, we're each entities, you know, and we're each a me. I'm Wayne, you're David, he's Kurt, and all the rest of that. So we are people, we are someone. But as someone, what are we? What is the nature of this one, this me, which has qualities and characteristics? And right, we do an inventory to find out what are the qualities and characteristics of this me, of this Wayne. And then to recognize that this Wayne, as I am, is an aspect of something far greater than me. And so the metaphor that I like very much, a classical one, is of the ocean and the wave. And so if we think of ourselves as, and recognize ourselves as waves, then what we are as waves is ocean. Mm. You see, it's not two things, and that's what Advaita means, not two. But there can be thousands of waves. There can be tens of thousands of waves, each with a name, each with a form, each with different qualities and characteristics, doing different things. And that's how life happens, through all of these waves. But what the wave is ocean. You see, we are not droplets. And that's what this claim of authorship is. When I talk about the FSA, it is when there is the claim that I am not a wave, I am a droplet, I am independent. What I do out of my own power, my own independent power, rather than what I do is a movement of the ocean. What I do as a wave, my actions, all of them, good and bad, are part of this vast movement of the ocean. With that recognition, then all of the guilt and the suffering diminishes or disappears.
You okay with that, Dave?
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you very much. Cheers, Dave. It's good to see you here, mate. And we've got a former, one of our former guests here in the audience there, Wayne. Frank Z is a Zen guy in Northern Ireland. Frank, you've got a question as well, haven't you, for Wayne?
Yeah. Hi, Wayne, and great to see you. Great to hear you. Frank here in Belfast. And my question, Wayne, would be, what makes you happy?
Depends on the day. There is no one thing that makes me happy, and something that makes me happy today may not make me happy tomorrow. That passes. But one of my favorite things to do is sit in stand in a trout stream and float a dry fly down to a trout. That makes me happy.
Thank you.
Fisherman, great. Okay, so we've got some more questions here that are coming in. Kaiser, you've got a question, haven't you? So can you unmute yourself, please, mate?
Hello, everyone. Hello, Wayne. Kaiser, I am an alcoholic. My specific question is regarding the belief in a higher power, the operation of the higher power. Let me just frame it so I can get it specific. I appreciate like the unknowable. I don't understand my higher power. When I first came into recovery and sobriety, that has allowed me to have a functional life, I did have a strong sense of a higher power, and I called that higher power God. And I had a relationship, a personal relationship, a conventional relationship in a Christian sense, and it was very meaningful and it was very, very real. Mm-hmm. And I can't criticize that, nor do I try to reinterpret that. Mm-hmm. And now I don't have that same personal relationship. It's changed. I don't understand it to the point where if I was taxed, I might become an agnostic. But I feel it's important to me to respect that relationship, that personal relationship, because the mechanisms of the steps, I use them, and I used a personal relationship, and I still try to do that, and it's a different thing. They're both. It's not but, it's more and. So a relationship to the higher power. How can we use that with the 12 steps in your perspective? Is it important to have a personal relationship?
My experience, and I can only speak from my experience was that my personal experience was with a representative of this higher power, a representation of this higher power. And that is what I had a relationship with. And everybody has the freedom within the 12 steps and to find their own representation to have a relationship.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
That's opened up a lot. Thank you.
Thanks, Kaiser, and thanks for all the work you do behind the scenes here, and to Anne as well. So, Jim McFadden, you've got a question. Do you want to unmute yourself there, Jim? Or can somebody unmute him? Jim?
I can read the question, or
yeah, you read it then, Anne. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, we've got
I just asked him to unmute. Maybe he can. I just touched that.
No, I understand what he said.
Okay.
Hi, Wayne.
Hi, Anne.
Three-part question.
Oh boy.
When I am out of my body, where am I?
That to me is a fascinating question to investigate. You say, okay, I am out of my body. What is this quality of I that is experiencing being out of the body? And I think that's an incredible inquiry and could be very productive.
Okay. How expansive is non-duality?
Non-duality, as I talk about it, this living teaching of Advaita, is totally expansive. It includes everything, excludes nothing.
Okay.
And what is found beyond non-duality?
Nothing.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, Anne. Thanks, Jim. Thanks for that, mate. I hope that helped. And we've also got a question from Jack G. Jack, good to see you, mate. Do you want to ask a question? You can unmute yourself. No?
Good to see you, David. Good to see everyone.
Hi, mate.
So my question is about the third step. And I guess over this past year, I've kind of thought about the third step a lot. And the third step in the 12 by 12, Bill writes as though someone's asking him a question. So the question is this that gets asked. If I keep turning my will in my life over to somebody or something else, what will become of me? I'll be like the hole in the donut. And I'll stop it there. So, I mean, I've actually studied emptiness quite a bit with a teacher, and our guy is Nagarjuna. Duality is part of that. So the thought I've had is, what would be wrong with being the hole in the donut? It's certainly better than anything that I've ever come up with. You know, the I, the self-existent, independent thing that thinks it is. And I've found the traveling much easier when I'm the hole in the donut. And think about what a hole in a donut is. It's empty. So if the donut is God or everything else that can be seen, heard, taste, touch, that's the donut. You know, where I'm sitting is the donut. And finding and really understanding that I am the I is the hole in the donut. And makes traveling a lot lighter is I guess my point. But I just wanted to maybe hear your thoughts on that. And I don't want to ask you questions about a topic that I don't know if you know about or not. But you know, in relation to emptiness.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you found a conception of that or an experience of that has brought you peace and made your path easier.
Thanks very much, Jack. It's good to hear you, mate. Thanks again for your support for this meeting. Now, Lebowski, you've got a question there, I believe.
Well, you know, I like always, once you get talking, it almost calms the need to ask a question, which I really appreciate, except what really turned my head was when you talked about the spiritual experience, the recognition that the need to drink is gone is a spiritual experience. Because I remember it was like a headache going away. I couldn't remember when it happened. It just happened. And it dawned on me, you know, that something was going on, because, you know, I, like you, had this I couldn't use the word God without an image that had been planted when I was a kid. So it really did sort of give me this idea of an expansive power. I have heard Ramesh mentioned, when I was watching some videos by a fellow named Roger Castillo. I don't know if he's a contemporary of yours, but he had the same sort of message of non-doership, which was confusing to me until you said false sense of authorship, which I just want to say really somehow was new language for me, but gave me a little insight as to what's going on. Gosh, I had a formulated question. I'm getting to it. I'm building to it. A Course in Miracles says we give everything all the meaning it has. So in a state of non-doership, is the meaning we give things of any impact? I guess is my question. And
well, of course, we give it to them. The way we perceive things is how they are. But the question that this raises is, do we control that process? Or is that process simply happening through us as part of a vast emotion?
Okay.
My question being the meaning we give to it while that's happening. Is it just part of the happening and it's of no consequence, or can we have any influence by the meaning we give things? I don't know. Do you have a feeling about that?
I do. And so what is implicit in the question is this quality of authorship, of control in giving meaning. And this is what this living teaching of Advaita I talk about is pointing you to look at, is what is it that is responsible for your giving a certain meaning to something? Is it you? If you are in control of it, by all means, change it. But what gives you the control? That's the question.
Okay.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you.
You're welcome, James.
Thanks, James. And again, thanks for, he comes along every week and asks a great question, he's a panel member. Now, Summer Lee, you've got a question there as well. Do you want to unmute yourself? Earth to Summer, you there?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
Here, I'm going to take this off for a second. Hello?
Yeah, good. You want to ask your question?
Sorry, I don't know if my stuff is working right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Just ask your question.
My question was, that was my question basically, was if we control our own thoughts.
Well, Summer, I would point you to look and see if you can always control your own thoughts. And if you can, then by all means, only think nice thoughts.
Thank you very much, Summer. Okay, so we've got, I think we've got you for another few 10 to 15 minutes, if that's okay, Wayne. Sure. Stephen Paris, good to see you, Stephen. Have you got a question?
Hi, I'm Stephen, an alcoholic.
Hey, mate.
I've really enjoyed listening to you, Wayne. And the question was, I mean, do you recommend Ramesh Balsekar's concept that we're a body-mind organism and we're only acting on up-to-date conditioning? Is that something that was helpful to you?
I found that notion to be very helpful as explaining this first step of powerlessness.
Yeah.
And by seeing, and then by doing inventory, I was able to see what this body-mind mechanism structure was. I could see what it is that it does, both historically and presently. And so that was like opening the door into recognizing I didn't make myself this way. If I was designing myself, I'd be much better than I am, I assure you. And I think we all would.
Yeah.
So the way that I am with these qualities and characteristics and these character defects, I'm given these. I didn't make these. And so this is the quality and the characteristic of this body-mind mechanism. And so it acts in accordance with its nature. And sometimes it acts good, and sometimes it acts badly. And the steps are wonderful in that it gives us this mechanism that when it acts badly, there's a way to clean up the mess that is created when it acts badly. So that it's like my life isn't nearly as messy as it was.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paul. It's good to hear you
Thanks
again, mate.
lot.
Thanks. Yeah, good to see you. Sorry, Paul F., you've got a question.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, I'm Paul. I'm an alcoholic. Hey, hi. Hi, Wayne. Thanks very much for sharing your time with us today. I've read your book. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was recommended to me by my sponsor, and you know, I've got a fairly half decent working knowledge of Advaita and non-duality, and it's formed, you know, the basis of my spiritual practice for the past few years. So I suppose the question I've got, I'm playing devil's advocate slightly, but it's a question that certainly I had when I started looking at this stuff. And I was just wondering if we could have your thoughts on it. If at the heart of this really is, you know, the pointing to this full sense of authorship and the sort of, you know, the similarities or the between that and powerlessness, step one, which you've already spoken about. Who is it that does the work, and what's the point really in doing it?
Well, you know who does the work. Paul does the work. Paul asks the questions. Paul does the work. Paul is the doer. Paul is the one who is the instrument through which things happen. The question of non-duality, or at least this non-dual teaching that I talk about, this living teaching of Advaita, is to say, what is the source of what Paul does, of the work that Paul does? Is it Paul? So we don't spend a lot of time saying, does Paul exist? Is Paul real? Am I a me? Am I not a me? You know, is this all an illusion? Is it all? We say, look, I'm doing something. What is the source of that which I do?
All right. Thanks very much, Paul. Zach, how are you? Do you want to come in?
Sure. Sorry. Thank you. Mine was along the lines of what Paul was asking when you talked about you must know yourself before you attempt to know God. I'm wondering if you could talk a little more about this and about one other specific thing. If there's ever times where there is this sense of connection that you have with all, including the FSA, and then something comes in and you think, should I not be feeling guilty or worried, or why am I feeling so centered? Does that come in, and if so, where do you go?
To me, to know oneself is the essence of this whole business. And so to know God, I do believe one of the widest doors to that is through the self, because what we always have is ourselves. And there is the sense of ourselves. So it's here. And so it is, and it's tangible, it's immediate, it's not philosophical, it's not intellectual. I exist. There's that feeling of me. And there's no arguing it, you see. So then, starting at this point of beingness, of being me, we can then perhaps, with grace, begin to look deeper into ourselves. Say, what am I? What is it that makes me breathe? What is it that is pumping my blood? What is it that's animating my thoughts? What is it that's flowing through me? What is this energy of me-ness? You see? But the starting point is with the self, with me.
That was beautiful. Thanks, Zach. That was great. Thanks, Wayne. That was great. Ruby, do you want to come in?
Hi, I'm Ruby. I'm an alcoholic.
Hey,
that
Ruby.
was just fabulous. Boy, it's really refreshing for me to hear this, because I just more or less sit on it quietly. You're so eloquent with it that, wow, it's just like a shower of grace.
Well,
thank you.
I
was in India. I've been on a path for a very long time, and I was in India with my master, and a guy got up and blew what it was to be an alcoholic. I mean, this guy just blew it. And he said, I don't understand what's going on here. He goes, there's a few of us here and we know who we are. And as long as we're here and we're doing this, we're fine. And we do everything that you tell us to do. And then we go home and we just get drunkard shit. And he said it just like that. And I'm sitting there shaking my head, and it's like, what the hell? Yeah, this was supposed to work. So he looked at the guy and he said, have you ever heard of AA? And the guy goes, well, yeah. And he goes, well, y'all might want to go back and go to AA, because it works if you work it. I mean, so we did, and we came back, and none of us have been drunk since. But there was a day working those steps when I heard something, I don't know what it was, and it said, quit the becoming. It's the unbecoming. You need to offload, delete the programming. And I thought, well, what the heck? And I thought it was weird, like you. I just quit drinking and using. And I mean, I'm a loadie. And then I went a bit crazy because I didn't know what to do with the thought processes. And I started studying with the people that you have talked about. And that's what it showed me, is that it's an unbecoming. I don't need to be anything. I don't really need to know anything. I don't really need to have answers for everything. And And the program has taught me what I do is I just do the next right thing. Life will, this particular path showed me that life will show me. Life shows up. And then because of the steps, I have a way to negotiate in it. And I like that. I love solution. I've never, I just can't tell you the joy that you brought me today. Seriously, just unadulterated, just the way I like it. And, you know, we like to be happy.
Of course.
We like to enjoy life. It's fantastic. It's miraculous. It's everything. Once you can do that, I mean, it's everything. It's everything. Okay.
Right.
Thank you so much. Just thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Oh my gosh. Merry Christmas.
Thank you, Ruby.
I'll be back.
You're a good one. And Fiona, I think there's one more question after Fiona, if you can hang on for a bit, Wayne. Is that all right? So sure. Fiona, do you want to ask a question?
Yes, hi Wayne. I've just started learning about non-duality. I've really more been into, well, obviously the 12-step program. I'm getting into the kind of spiritual side of that a lot more, and Buddhism. So obviously that's about being awareness, realizing that I'm awareness. I'm part, as you were saying, of the ocean. I'm a wave in the ocean. But I've also got bipolar. So when I'm mentally ill, I find it difficult to know myself and to connect with my higher power. So I wondered if you had any thoughts on that. Thank you.
I'm sorry, Fiona. I don't have any experience with bipolarism. I'm sympathetic to the difficulties that can bring, but I have absolutely no experience to share with you on that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Fiona. And if you want to hang around after the meeting, maybe there's some people that might be able to have a chat with you, but you just hang in there, and it's really good to see you here. Thank you very much. Okay, so final question from the floor from Simon Measures. Simon, have you got a question? I think you've sent a message. If you're still there, Simon.
Yeah, I'm still here. Thanks, David. Thanks, Wayne. Thanks for coming along. Would you say, Wayne, that a primary obstacle to truth is psychological time, as expressed by mind?
Sorry, Simon. I don't know what you're referring to when you talk about truth.
Well, you talked about awareness. Consciousness.
Okay.
Being.
God, Tao.
God, Tao, yeah.
Yeah, okay. And the obstacle to experience?
I don't know why it came to me particularly, but I just, maybe it's something, maybe Eckhart Tolle said, maybe it came to me, the idea that he seemed to suggest that ego, as you used to term, the false sense of authorship that you had at some point called ego, he seemed to think that it was expressed by, fed on, and was in a sense synonymous with the capacity, the mind's necessity, as ego in a sense inhabits it. That time, psychological time. So I coulda, woulda, shoulda. And then you project fearfully into the future. Time within mind, not clock time. What I'm asking is that, do you feel that is an obstacle to knowing?
I would say that the coulda, woulda, shoulda is what is the substance of suffering.
Mm.
I mean, that's what suffering is the projection of the moment into the past and the future in terms of our own entitification, our own being a person who is independent. And it all flows back to that aspect. of this quality. Not that we're instruments of time. Of course we are. We have to be. Everything happens within time. But that it is when there is the claim of being independent as the instrument, that's where all of the past and future problems occur.
Oh. So would it be fair to say that claim is made in time?
As everything that happens in time, yes, by definition.
So would you say the answer is be here now?
The answer is that we are here now. We can't be anywhere else. Even when we are thinking otherwise.
Yeah, well, quite. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, mate.
You're very welcome, Simon.
Thank you very much. That's great. So I'm going to finish up. I'm going to ask the last question, and I think you've already answered it, really. So about the book that you take to a deserted island, I think you did mention that. Can you give us a little bit more on why that would be? If you had one book, you were washed up on a deserted island, tell us what that book is and why. What is it about it that is so important to you?
Well, I really think it would be the Tao Te Ching. To me, it is the purest of spiritual texts. It is the one that is that speaks most richly to me of this eternal truth that all of the teachings point to. And so it's simply a matter of personal preference.
Okay. Thank you. Well, listen, thank you very much. Just to say about there's not going to be a Here's Tom next week. Thank you very much, Wayne. I'm just going to do a quick announcement. Next week, there's not going to be a Tom. The next one's on New Year's Day, where we've got Joe C, who's going to be coming along. And Joe C is a really interesting guy. He runs his own podcast, and he's got some really interesting conceptions of a higher power or not. I think he's largely agnostic. I might be wrong there. And just to say, Wayne's stuff is in the chat here. Now, his book, as I said, is called Powerlessness, Advaita and the 12 Steps of Recovery. It's in the chat there, and it's at www.advaita.org. And you should be able to navigate it from there if you type in Wayne Lickerman. Wayne's also got his own YouTube channel, which I highly recommend. I've been on it several times, and he certainly been a player on in my never-ending search. So it's been great, and I just wanted to wish you all a very, very Merry Christmas. And Wayne, I want to say thank you so much for coming along. I didn't ask the big question. We had a chat during the week, and I said I promised you I wouldn't ask the questions, but I'm gonna ask you myself later on. But it's really great to be here, and thank you very much, Wayne. Everyone, a big round of applause for Wayne.
Thank you for having me, David.